The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for or represent. All stories, events, and tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they were told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident, an aviation podcast that explores the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, an airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. Welcome aboard Flight 84 of the Squawk Ident podcast, recorded on the 22nd of July, 2021, from the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's flight, we are proud to be joined by some fantastic Squawk Ident crew members. Rob D is here. And Captain Roger is here as well. Today we will discuss a rough trip sequence riddled with delays and shenanigans. Rob will tell us about his recent type rating, and we just want to say congratulations to Rob as well. We also bring back a segment called In the Kit Bag, where we discuss flashlights. What kind of flashlight do you use for your pre-flights? Please don't tell me you're using your cell phone flashlight. That and so much more on this episode of the Squawk Ident podcast. Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate and start those virtual podcast engines. Flight 84 of the Squawk Ident podcast is officially underway. To help me kick off today's show is superb aviator and Squawk Ident co-host. He is a former international professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an A&P in avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, a boat skipper, commercial drone operator, and currently a full-fledged Airbus pilot for Legacy Airlines. The name of the airline we use here on the show as an alias to our employer, a U.S. mainline carrier. He joins us today with a fresh type rating in hand. From his man cave in Flower Mound, Texas, help us in welcoming back to the show our very own Mr. Rob D. Rob, how you doing?
Hey, how you doing, Tony? It's good to be back. I'm happy to say I am done with Airbus training. I guess all I have left is IOE, but I am relieved to be to put all that behind me and look forward to getting back to somewhat of a normal flying schedule.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. How long were you in training in total?
Now I look back, it's pretty much 4 weeks. I mean, I left the 7-3 on the 24th or so last month. So here we are. It's the 22nd. So yeah, pretty much a month. It's amazing how fast they can push you through a program like that. So
yeah, you have been drinking from that fire hose for a long time, my friend. Congratulations.
Tell me about it. And it's a completely different type of flying than the 7-3. So yeah, I can't wait to share some of it with you guys.
Yeah, and we look forward to hearing about that a little later in the show. Well, also here to help us get Flight 84 of the Squawk Ident podcast underway is an exceptional aviator and co-host. He is an award-winning trophy-hoisting tennis champion, a professional CFI, II, and MEI flight instructor, a former freight dog, a former airline pilot, a current King Air flight instructor, a Falcon 2000 commander, a captain, and a corporate operator as well. He joins us fresh from his cousin's wedding and an adventure off the middle fork of the American River where he relived his youth from his days as a river rafting guide. From his palace of chaos from somewhere in San Diego, California. Please help me in welcoming back to the show an amazing co-host, Captain Roger. Captain, how you doing?
It's good to be back. Glad to be alive. I've survived my adventures, and yeah, here we are.
Yeah. And so, we were a pre-show. We were talking a little bit about what we've been up to, and you're like reliving my youth and
yes,
running the rapids, and I really enjoyed hearing that because I remember when we first met, you were telling me how what did you do before this? Well, I was a river rafting guide.
Yeah, that was a long time ago.
So, do you still got it?
I guess that's kind of depends on what God it entails. Generally speaking, I'd say yes. The only difference is I'm about, almost 2 decades removed from it. And I could not imagine at the end of the day going back and doing the same thing the next day, because my body definitely let me know that it was not quite the same.
Yeah. No, I feel you.
From a rafting, reading the water, running, that was all the same. But oh my goodness, physically, wow.
Yeah. Well,
And I'm proud to report also that I was much more religious in applying sunscreen than I was in my youth as well.
Oh, that good. Very good.
So, yeah.
Now you did use a sunscreen that is not under the current recall, correct?
I'm not entirely sure, actually.
Oh.
I do know that I had some Neutrogena stuff, which I think some of it has fallen under that, but I don't think so. There's only a couple of brands of that, but
yeah. Well,
it stopped me from getting burned. Maybe I'll, get cancer anyway. I'm not sure, but
well,
So what SPF do you have to use now, Roger?
It's not so much the SPF. It's just simply applying it would be a step in the right direction for me.
Okay.
I was not. Yeah. You remember that? Who was it? I think it's Baz Luhrmann. I think it's called Sunscreen. It was like in the late '90s. He had that commencement speech, and the first thing have you guys? Oh, it's actually pretty good. But
I'll have to look this up. I'm writing this down. Was it Baz? What?
Baz Luhrmann. He's a movie director, but it was a I think it was a mock commencement speech, but it's actually legit. It's very good. But the very first thing in it is wear sunscreen.
Ladies and gentlemen of the class of '99, wear sunscreen. If I could offer you only one tip for the future, sunscreen would be it.
I graduated like 2 years after this came out, and I completely just blew off this advice, and I wish I had listened to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
Wear your sunscreen, folks.
Absolutely wear your sunscreen. I actually, I buy the spray can, and that's like one of the bulkiest things in my suitcase for my, layovers and stuff. And I apply sunscreen. I used to not apply it as much unless I was going to the beach or doing something outdoors.
Sure.
But now, like every morning in the hotel, I put some on my face and my neck and my arms because, you're at 37,000 feet. Although the aircraft has UV protection through the windows, you still cook. I mean, you sizzle up pretty good, and those, little spots that show up on your hands and arms, when you get older and into your golden years, those what do they call them? Liver marks. Not very
sunspots or liver spots.
Yeah, they're not very attractive. So
yeah.
I might have a few of those.
Yeah.
It is.
Some serious stuff, folks.
For an aviation podcast, sunscreen. Yes.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Highly recommended.
You're in this little glass easy bake oven at whatever altitude you're flying along in, GA or otherwise. Definitely wear sunscreen and sun protection. Yeah. And we're going to talk a little bit.
Yeah, Neutrogena has a really good like post-shave lotion that has like 15 SPF in it.
Yeah.
So
does it soften your skin?
It's supple. It's very supple.
Very nice.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. It's funny how much, growing up, the only man products you needed is Brute aftershave
by Fabergé.
Or Old Spice. That's what my dad.
My Axe body spray.
No, Axe didn't come out until way later.
Some of us are younger.
Yeah, now you go to like Target or whatever, and you go. There's a whole aisle just for men's products, and some of them are like really manly. It's like, this is for my beard conditioner.
Yeah, I know. It's
which
crazy
I have a
stuff
few of those when I when I don't shave. But anyway, let's move forward. I'm really excited to hear about Rob's type rating adventure. But before we get into that, let me just give you a little bit of background about this last sequence I had. And, there are trips that you will remember where you start off for a 4-day trip and it starts off with a whammy and it never gets better.
Mm.
And that's exactly what happened to me on this last trip. We recorded the show last week. I think it was the 12th. And I had to go on a trip on the 14th, I believe it was. So a couple days later, actually the 15th, with the sign-in was on the 14th. So a red eye out of Ontario. Now, I live close to the Ontario airport, and as the listeners know, it's been a huge quality of life improvement for myself. I don't have to deal with LA traffic going and coming to the LAX International Airport. On top of that, the company is having this billion-dollar renovation of Terminal 4 and 5. So Legacy Airlines is going to be revamped in Los Angeles. And they actually got rid of our crew room, our rest facility, and our flight office. It all got moved. Now it's moved into a temporary location this last week. So it's all kind of new and, where do I go? What's the code for the door? And all these things that are just a headache, especially when you're kind of on a time crunch and you want to be efficient. And now you got to go a little earlier to figure out, well, where's the new place and how do I get into the crew room and all these things. So it's been kind of nice to be situated in a small airport where I literally park across the street from the terminal and just walk across, and it's a 10-minute car ride, and I don't have to get on a freeway. So
I know, man.
It's been
a
really
quality of life changer.
It's been really nice. But I had a trip that really tested my resolve last week.
Yeah.
It started out with a red eye out of Ontario to DFW. And the sign-in time was, I believe, 11:45 p.m.
Wow.
Now, the nice thing about this is our contract has provisions where if you start a trip before midnight on a certain day, you get paid the minimum pay, the duty rig for that day, which is 5 hours and 15 minutes or something like that. Yeah. So I signed in at 11:45. I got paid 5 hours for that day. So 4 day, it's considered a 4-day trip, not a 3-day trip. So I get my 20 hours minimum pay guarantee. It's a fantastic situation. Unfortunately, the way our contract is over at Legacy, if your flight is scheduled to go past midnight, you don't get paid for that following day until after, what is it, like 3 a.m. or something like that, or
2 p.m.
2 a.m.
01:59.
So there's a much bigger buffer on the tail end of that. And so, but either way, this worked out quite nice for me where I signed in late at night. I get there and the airplane had been delayed out of Dallas. So I was sitting at the gate and we're the last flight to leave the airport. So everyone's waiting for us. The TSA is waiting for us. The newsstand employee that runs the newsstand that sells water and things like that, they're waiting for us. Everyone's waiting for us to leave. And they can't really go until the last passenger gets on the flight.
Yeah.
So we were kind of late because the inbound was late. And I and the flight attendants were there, but the captain wasn't there. And I had not met this person. I had not flown with them before. So I figured, well, they haven't signed in yet, but I'm sure they're on their way. So I gave the gate agent a heads up. I said, yeah, I'm here. Swipe my badge. I'm here ready to go. Haven't seen the captain yet. So just kind of keep an eye out for him. And if he doesn't show up here in the next 10, 15 minutes, let me know. I can make some phone calls and make sure that they read their schedule correctly. So that already was the first drop in the bucket. Then I get down to the aircraft, and what I saw was something that I had not seen before, at least not personally. I've seen photos of these incidences online, and I actually took a picture, and I'd like to share that.
Oh, I think I know what it is.
So I walk up to the aircraft and on the jet bridge, and I see that the jet bridge, normally on an Airbus, there's a step up from the jet bridge into the boarding area or the first class galley. There's normally, if you look at an Airbus entryway, there's a black dot painted just below the door, about 6 inches below the entry door. And that tells the jet bridge operator to park the aircraft or park the jet bridge onto the aircraft so that the dot is visible. Then on the right side of the entry door, on the right side of the jet bridge, there's a little wheel that is on an arm, and that gets connected to the aircraft. It touches the aircraft. As the airplane is
Weight
shifted, or people are getting off the airplane, so the airplane would get lighter, and then the struts would decompress and they would move up a little bit. There could be bag loading or bag unloading from the tail of the airplane, which could cause the nose of the aircraft, which is where the boarding area is, to go up and down. There's fueling of the aircraft. As the fuel is being put on the aircraft moves up and down. So this jet bridge needs to have this auto leveler, which is the little wheel that says do not touch, don't ever touch it. That's there so that the jet bridge can move up and down. And if you're ever boarding on an aircraft and you're sitting there in a line on the jet bridge and you feel the jet bridge kind of go boop and just move up and down a little bit, that's what's happening, is as the aircraft is moving up and down, as is the jet bridge, to prevent this scenario from happening. And you can see that on a photo that I'm sharing, that the jet bridge actually either did not move up and down or moved up and was pushing up on the entry door, on the L1 door, the entry. So this could be disastrous. So I immediately called the gate agent down. They lowered the jet bridge, and I proceeded to do a thorough pre-flight. I did my best to inspect the door to see if anything looked like there was damage. But I'm no mechanic, and there's something that I noticed. See something, say something. So I told the gate agent as soon as I came back from my walk around, I asked them, I'm like, was it just parked wrong or what's going on? And he's like, no, actually, I think there's something wrong with the jet bridge because I lowered it, and by the time you came back from the walk around, the jet bridge has slowly creeped up. So there's a failure in the system. And I'm like, well, okay, can you just lower it and then turn it off and so that it doesn't do this? And he's like, no. So he had to call out facilities maintenance to come and inspect the jet bridge. And I started to get the ball rolling to call maintenance operation control to come out and inspect the door of the aircraft, because it's definitely a problem. The only issue is I still didn't have a captain. And so now I'm checking in the computer to see if the captain is signed in. I'm thinking, this is not good. So I said, either way, I'm going to have to call maintenance. So I looked up the captain's phone number and I texted him and I said, hey, man, here's a photo of what I see on the aircraft. Just want to make sure you're on your way. If you would like, I will call MOC and have them contact contract maintenance to come out and inspect this, because that's what's going to have to happen. No sooner did I send that, he shows up. And he goes, oh, sorry, I went to the wrong terminal. I haven't been here in like 20 years. And since it's new to fly out of Ontario for the Airbus, a lot of pilots, they get assigned a trip like this, and they, it's like, okay, well, how hard can it be? And then they realize, oh, well, there's two terminals in Ontario, Terminal 2 and Terminal 4, and they're identical looking, and so you could go to the wrong one. That's what he did. So he had to walk all the way back, and so he showed up, and he's like, yeah, go ahead, call MOC while I review the AML and give a briefing to the flight attendants. So I call MOC, and the guy that answers the phone, he goes, what's going on? I told him. I said, yeah, it came to the airplane. The jet bridge was pushed up against the entry door. We'd like to have an inspection performed before we leave to just, make sure that there's a log of this. And he goes, well, is there any visible damage? I'm like, well, no, but the jet bridge was definitely pressed up against it. I witnessed them lower the jet bridge.
I would say, other than the jet bridge acting as a nose landing gear holding up the airplane by the door, no.
Yeah, it left like a little mark on the jet bridge. And he goes, well, if there's no damage, I mean, because otherwise I'd have to call out a contract, and this is going to delay the flight.
Yep. So
I put it on speakerphone so the captain could hear this. And I'm like, well, we want it inspected. There was contact, and we want it inspected. We're not going to go until it's inspected. It's in the logbook. And he goes, well, and the captain goes, just get contract out here now.
Yeah.
Click. They hang up on me. And I was like, oh my God, what's the big deal? I mean, they have to call
Yeah.
contract maintenance, big deal. So they came out, they did an inspection. An hour later, we departed with no signs of damage. It was not an issue. It was just kind of a precautionary thing. But it was definitely an issue that needed to be taken care of. My philosophy on this, and I'm really interested to hear what both of you have to say about this, is if you approach an aircraft and you see something that is minor in nature, like, I don't know, there's like a one of the Zeus fasteners or a rivet that is not connected or in sequence with another loose Zeus fastener is popped or something, something small, something minor. And the only person that knows about it is you, and you go and tell the other pilot, the captain or the first officer, and you're like, do you want to write this up here, or is this like a nuisance thing, or it's not a safety to flight issue? It's like, well, we'll be back in base tomorrow or tonight. The airplane will be in base. Let's just write it up when we get there, and they can come and, pop it back in or whatever. I have no problem with that personally. Now, the minute a third party is involved or any issue that's related to safety of flight, to where if you get ramp checked right now that you're in trouble, then there's no question. You write it up. You don't wait. You don't let the other crew take care of it. So you take a delay.
Yeah.
Big deal. Do you guys feel the same way about that? Or is it like, if it's there, you write it up, no questions asked?
Go ahead, Roger.
Well, for me, I definitely can answer that. I fall more into your camp. I do not write things up unless they needed to be written up. And to be honest with you, even in the scenario that you just brought up with the door, my first course of action probably would not have been to write it up and to call maintenance. Obviously, I'd get the jet bridge, and then I probably would have tried to see what was going on when we tried to close the door. Does everything line up? Does it actually close normally? And if everything closes normally, and the important thing is just lining it up, because the last thing you want to have to happen is obviously jam the door closed. But if everything was operating normally, I probably wouldn't have even contacted maintenance to begin with on that. I'm a very much, a safety of flight and partially some timing. If you find that, and it's still an hour prior to push, then that's something different. If you've got a loose fastener or whatever, and you've got an hour to go to push, call maintenance and get them to take care of it, because I don't like to push things off either. It's more of what's the easiest time in order to get this stuff done? When is it most convenient for this to get done expeditiously, so that we don't delay any more flights than we need to? And whether that's at the flight at the time or going back to the base for the next one. And so that's kind of the camp that I fall into. Obviously, if it's a safety of flight, that's a no-go thing. If it's going to be, we always say as pilots, we get there first. I'm very much, an advocate for that. And if it's something that I think might affect the safety of a flight, that's something that needs to get checked out. Now, the cosmetic stuff, things that are not safe, I'm rather willing to get it done later.
Mm-hmm.
If that's a better option given the circumstances at the time.
Yeah. And Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with both you guys. Safety of flight is definitely the priority. Time is it doesn't even come into factor for me. It's probably third or fourth on my list on all that stuff. So I think you did the right thing. I probably would have just gone directly to maintenance. I wouldn't have even let the captain know until he showed up, via phone. I'd just write it up, put his number on it, and just go with it. It doesn't matter. That's you're the PIC until he shows up. So
I like that.
you just write it up. The thing I have, I spent 12 years of aircraft maintenance in the Air Force. So I have a little different approach on a lot of things than they do here at Legacy or at most other places. So if I see like a fastener that's loose, especially forward of the intake of a motor,
Mhm.
I always call, because you never know if that little fastener, that 5-cent fastener, is going to go through the motor,
Right.
cause millions of dollars of damage, or just fall onto the taxiway at some point and get picked up by another airplane. But use your discretion. I mean, that there's times where they're just loose, and you can like rub your finger over it and see if it's just kind of rattling in there.
Mhm.
And if it's like dangling and falling, getting ready to fall out, obviously, that's something that should be addressed right away. But and then that door, because you don't know how much pressure was exerted on it, and you could only ascertain how much, you can only tell at that time how much is on it. You didn't know how much the plane shifted before you even got there,
Right.
or the jet bridge shifted. So the and you can probably close the door and have all the proximity switches line up and it's showing closed, but from a pressurization and rigging point of view, that that could be something, could be damaged there. So,
Yeah.
or the slide could be damaged and you can't see it because it's on the bottom.
Mhm.
So, there's a number of reasons why I'd call maintenance out for that. When we had that happen in Mexico, we were on the 7-3, it was like about a year ago, deplaning the aircraft, and the jet bridge was set correctly initially, and then you can just hear it going crink, and it shift, and then 10 seconds later, crink, it shift, and I'm looking out there, I'm like, this thing's kind of going rogue on us. And next thing you know, it was riding up on the door, and it kept going ring, ring, ring. And the door, when you stood out there, you could see the door was kind of cockeyed like that.
Ugh.
And so we canceled everything there, and ended up spending the night in Cancun. Not Cancun, Puerto Vallarta, because that airplane was taken off the schedule. But and there was another rogue incident a long time ago with a jet bridge at Sandpiper, where the jet bridge actually, I was the captain on this one. We got in early from like Midland or something like that, landed in DFW at like 7 in the morning. And when I parked the plane, set the parking brake, we're waiting for the jet bridge to come up to the plane. The lady was having just a heck of a time trying to get the thing to do what she wanted it to do. And it's like lurching, and then it'd go back, and then you see the wheels shift and it lurch and the bell. And took her a few minutes to get get the jet bridge up to the plane. Long story short, when she got there, she pokes her head and she's like, God, I was having a hard time getting the jet bridge up to the airplane. And I kind of nodded. I was like, yeah, it looks like you're having a hard time, but everything good? She's like, yeah. So everybody got off the airplane. We went up, got a little breakfast. We're doing a turn, came back down the jet bridge. And as me, the FO, and the flight attendant were walking down the jet bridge, you hear the bell from the jet bridge go off. And all of a sudden the jet bridge just starts going, side to side.
Oh my gosh.
Boosh, 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 boosh. And we were just kind of bracing ourselves. And next thing you know, it just stops after like 10 or 15 seconds. So I kind of hustled down to the bottom to see what, if there was somebody driving the jet bridge, and there was nobody there. So I look outside and I see the rampers kind of just, clearing the area. And start looking at what happened. The jet bridge pushed the nose of the ERJ over about 5 feet off the center line and still
Whoa.
had pressure on it. So it was in a list. So like the right wing was like 3 feet off the ground, and the left wing was 12 feet or so off the ground, and it was still had pressure on it. So I picked up the phone call of my phone right away and called the chief pilot office and got a hold directly to the chief pilot. And I was like, hey, I don't care what you're doing right now, if you're in a morning meeting or anything, but you need to come out to B36 ASAP. So he's like, all right, I'll be right out there. So he comes running down the jet bridge and he's like, holy mackerel, look at this.
Yeah.
You know what he does? He looks in the window. He's like, were you in the cockpit when this happened? I'm like, no, sir. He's like, okay, yep, parking brake set. It's not your aircraft. It's the gate agents. It's not your responsibility. And I'm like,
That's it.
okay, I'm gonna go get my stuff out of the airplane because I'm gonna assume this plane's out of service. He's like, yep.
Oh,
Anyway, that was a
crap.
long story on that one, but
No, that was great.
it was good stuff. And occasionally they have, the agents at all these airports. Obviously, Roger, you don't have to deal with this very much. The jet bridges are, are a little temperamental sometimes. Time since we fly so much, we see it a lot. But time to time these jet bridges don't work properly, and they have to call facility maintenance down to
Yeah.
either reset them or whatever. So they're
They're
complicated.
very, very heavy.
Yes,
People don't
yeah,
realize how heavy and how industrial
yeah,
these
and they're
things are.
difficult to drive too because of the way they work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just the amount of the times that those are used on a daily basis. And if you really look at it, when you're deplaning or when you're boarding an airplane of your guys' side, think of the weight that those things have to be able to support and not move up and down because of that
Right.
picture that you
Yeah.
just showed, Tony. I mean, yeah, you want to talk about a piece of equipment that needs to be
Yeah.
industrial grade.
Yeah, and to add to that, they also, you go to some of the international terminals, we'll pull in with a 737 or an Airbus, and the jet bridge is configured for that, and then you can pull away, and then next thing you know, a 777 or another 787 can pull in, and that jet bridge needs to translate up 10, 15 feet or extend out 50, 100 feet to to another door. So those things are quite quite complicated to be able to do all that stuff. They're kind of like transformers.
Yeah.
More than meets the eyes.
Yeah, they really are. And then
Yep.
and I like the air stairs,
Definitely.
because I get it. You have to have jet bridges, and in the modern world with the aircraft that have the capacity that they do, and you keep people out of the elements and everything. But man, I really like air stairs. I love it when
I
we go to
agree.
Mexico and they just roll up the stairs and you just walk
Yeah,
down.
so
and it's
easy.
Like, hey, I'm here. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Come fly some business jets.
Hey, yeah, you
Yeah.
got
Air
the stairs
stairs all the time.
built in
Got
on the
the
door.
stairs.
The airplane has stairs built on the door.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, I might have to take you up on that invitation here. But yeah, so it was a really interesting start to the trip, and I really wish that was the only issue. That was the first 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and it's crazy too, because for you on a red eye, even though you're just starting out, this is the beginning of the ending of a long day for you, just physically and mentally. You try to get as much rest and everything as you can before you get there. But let's face it, 11 o'clock at night, you're ready to go to bed.
Yeah, I mean, even though I've learned to take a nap, as a matter of fact, and we're going to get into that here in a bit as well. I'm doing the exact same trip tonight. So after this recording, I'll be wrapping it up and start winding down this afternoon for a nice couple hours of sleeping. But what happens is when you're delayed on a red eye, your mentality is, okay, we're going to push off of here at midnight. We're going to get to where we are at 6 a.m. Hopefully we can get there before the sun comes up, get to the hotels to trick our psyche that it's still nighttime and you can go straight to sleep. And so now you're delayed an hour or two. Now you're like, oh God, now the sun's going to be in my eyes as I'm flying east, and all these factors. And you're like, okay. So we ended up, these red eyes are usually like an 11-hour layover. And then that same evening you go back and fly out. Well, of course that got eaten up into. So our layover ended up being a minimum rest layover, which is exactly 10 hours with the new FAR 117. I shouldn't say new, but with FAR 117 for airlines, 10 hours is the minimum rest. So we got to the airport there in DFW, had our minimum rest, and then that evening we took off and went from DFW to Savannah. Now, with the crew meals being there's just no way around it, substandard at Legacy Airlines.
Meals.
They're not meals. They're
snacks.
I'd prefer a bag of chips. I mean, they're really bad. It's embarrassing. Yeah. Everyone's talking about it online.
Poor Roger has to hear us complain about this, but it's horrible, dude.
Well, when you don't have the
bad
time to just put the credit card down and go get a meal, have it delivered, Uber Eats. No, you can't do that. We're go.
Which we received some guidance from our union saying,
Don't you guys have Wi-Fi on the airplane? Just put an order in
Yeah.
on the inbound flight
Sure.
and have them deliver it to B37.
Roger,
that'd be awesome.
the cockpit crew, or I'm sorry, the flight deck crew is not allowed to
can't say cockpit
access the Wi-Fi for personal use.
Can you pick up the intercom phone and call the flight attendants?
Say, hey, while you're back there doing
Can you
nothing,
just hop on the phone real quick?
Here's my credit
You guys
card
want
number. Why don't
make
you
sure
go
that
ahead
you
and order
ask-
us some?
That's why you better ask and make sure if they want anything.
there you
Come on,
go.
you guys are highly paid professional
Like, what is
pilots.
a Manolo Blahnik thing ordered online? What is this?
Well,
Just saying. So we ended up, having this minimum layover, and then you have to get to the airport a little earlier to at least pick up a meal because you're hungry. You've been sleeping most of the day. And I don't know, everyone I've talked to says the same thing. On a red eye, the next day you get about 5 hours of rest, and that's about it. The body clock says, "Hey, you're supposed to be up now," and so that's exactly what happens. DFW to Savannah the next day or that evening, and it was a relatively good flight. Nothing really major happened. I thought, okay, that's it. We got rid of our one issue for the trip. And we get to Savannah a little late. And of course, downtown Savannah is absolutely gorgeous. People everywhere. The hotel was full. And the next morning, I got up at a relatively decent hour, went for a run along the river front, found the Black Rifle Coffee Company, its main store. And I was like floored because I've been following them online. And I got to go in and order myself a Black Rifle coffee. Got a T-shirt. I mean, it was a pretty cool place. They've done it right, and part of the proceeds goes to veteran organizations to help with veterans of our armed services. So I'm all for that. Had a good day. Met up with some of my crew members. Went for lunch. Took a walk around downtown Savannah. A lot of architecture and history there. And then proceeded to the airport for an afternoon flight, and the inbound flight was delayed. So nice. Okay, what am I going to do? Well, we're going to sit there in the gate area where all the other passengers are, or I can go and grab myself a nice scoop of ice cream from Leopold's, famous ice cream from Savannah, rated 3rd best ice cream in the U.S. So, of course, I had a cup of the coffee chocolate chip and sat there, pulled my mask down, and I was sitting there eating my ice cream, and people were looking at me like, this guy's really enjoying his ice cream. Yes, I am.
Yeah. Hell yeah, I am.
So we took off out of Savannah, a little bit behind schedule, but we caught back up in DFW. And this is where it all kind of starts to fall apart yet again. So
DFW.
I grab my trusty flashlight and I go for a walk around. What I found was a tire that definitely needed some attention. So,
oh man, look at that.
When you do a walk around, there's all kinds of criteria, as Rob is like fresh out of the schoolhouse. He knows exactly what to look for in a walk around. First thing you do is you do this like kind of what we call a global assessment of the aircraft. You just make sure that the chocks are in, that it's not going to roll on you, that there's power connected to the aircraft, and there's no like physical damage. And as you walk around the airplane, one of the main things that you're checking are the tires, the brakes, any fluid leaks, anything that just doesn't look right. And for those, I'll put a link in the show notes with a picture that can't see it for the audio version of the podcast, but there is a tire here that has steel cords showing on the inside edge of the number 1 tire, which is the right outer, all the way around. And so I took a photo of it.
Not sure they're steel, but that's definitely cord.
Yeah. Well, they're definitely metal.
Oh, they were?
Yeah, there's metal cord.
I didn't know they used metal.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
On these Michelin tires for the Airbus. Yeah. And so I took a photo, came back inside, and showed it to my captain. Said, "Captain, this is what it looks like." And he says, "Well, I know that there is a certain amount of steel cords that are acceptable to be visible on a tire, and it could still be good for so many more cycles. But that looks like it's excessive. Let's contact maintenance and have them come out. Okay. Being in base, they say, yeah, no problem. We'll come out. We'll take a look. And sure enough, within 10 minutes, there was a maintenance personnel sitting there. And he says, yeah, man, you're allowed to go with, I forget the how many.
25% of the
25 or 30% of the circumference of the tire can
yeah.
show some steel cords, but with no more than a depth of so many microns. So I don't know. So he goes, but man, this is like 90% of your tire is showing steel cords. So we're going to do a tire change. Okay. Captain says, how long do you think? And he's like, oh, it shouldn't take more than, well, with the considering the shift change right now with maintenance, probably about 90 minutes. 90 minutes? Really? For a tire change? He goes, yeah, it's, by the time the new crew has to clock in and the old crew's there, it's not enough time for the old crew to get started, and whoever starts it has to finish it. Like, okay. Of course, you can't board the aircraft because you're going to be jacking it up. Mm-hmm. So the crew members can stay on board. So I got everything ready for the pre-flight. We kind of talked about the route, the weather, and that took all 5 minutes. And then as I'm sitting there, I could feel the airplane getting jacked up. And so I'm like, oh, they're working on it.
Quick tidbit of useless information. Do you know why the crew members can stay on board?
No way.
Because you're part of the basic operating weight of the airplane. So if you put passengers on in bags, that's not part of the so they can only work with a basic weight of the airplane when they're doing maintenance on it like that.
Oh, so no bags and no passengers?
Yeah, exactly. But they'll usually just stop with the bags if they've already started loading them, and they won't work anymore because it's, I'm sure there's like everything, there's a buffer.
I like it.
All that stuff. Anyway, that's what I learned.
And I thank you for that. That's actually, I didn't know that. So that's what happened. We felt the airplane go up, and about 10 minutes later, we felt the airplane go down. I was like, that was quick. And then the maintenance guy comes in and he goes, sorry, guys, the jack broke. We need to go and get another jack from the hangar.
Shit.
Yeah. Hour later, airplane starts to go up. They change the tire, comes back down. So, yeah, we departed DFW on day 2, 2 hours delayed because of the steel cords showing on the tires. I put a new tire on. We were good to go. Made it to Portland, Oregon late. And got to the hotel, and now they had to delay our flight the next morning because we didn't have the required minimum rest period. So that turned into another 10-hour layover. And the last day 4 technically, was back to Dallas, Ontario. And I thought, well, okay, what can go wrong? So we make it to Dallas, and we had
going to Dallas again.
Yeah, Dallas again. We had an aircraft swap, and now we noticed that we're the last flight of the day, and so it was like was it 10 o'clock departure? Yeah, originally it was scheduled for a 10:40 departure, and we had like 2 hours, so I went, grabbed a bite to eat, sat down at one of their wonderful eateries at DFW, and I look over and I see, ting, your flight's delayed. 1 hour. Inbound flight's delayed. Like, okay, so I go in there, work my magic, and find out that the aircraft that we're waiting for is in Orlando and is not taking off. And there's a little bit of weather, but from what I can tell, I don't see why there's a delay. 20 minutes later, ting, your flight's delayed 2 hours. Like, oh God, now it's like this is going to go into day 5. So the captain calls me. He goes like, "Hey man, what do you want to do? Are you tired? Are you fatigued yet? I'll stay in Dallas one more night." I'm like, well, I mean, I'm sitting here having an iced tea and just on the computer. It's up to you. I feel good. He's like, I feel good too. I think we're good. He goes, I'm going to make some phone calls. We're going to find another airplane because, like, hey, that's a great idea. He's got some pull.
Don't you think they're doing that already?
So he calls.
Are they?
No.
That's what I'm like, whose job are you doing?
And he calls, and I don't know what
plane.
I don't know what he told him, but he calls me back and he goes, "They said that they're working on it and leave him alone." I was like, okay. So there we get, ding, you're delayed 2.5 hours. I'm like, oh yeah, no, I'm not going to be departing Dallas at like after 2 nights of minimum rest, delays after delays. I'm like, this is not going to work for me. And just then we got, boom, you have a new aircraft. Your delay is now only an hour delay. So I'm like, okay. So I go to that gate. We're waiting for the inbound flight. It's coming from LA. It's already departed. I mean, okay, we're back on track. Here we go. So I'm sitting there in the area, and I kind of moved to the side. It's late at night, so it's not very crowded. And I moved to a different gate next door where there's not many passengers. And I sit there, and I'm just waiting for the inbound airplane. And there's one other passenger sitting about 5-6 seats behind me. And he comes up to me, and he's clearly been drinking something. He walks up to me, and he's a SoCal boy. You know, he's got the Lakers jersey on, and he's like, "Hey, man, what gate?" I'm like, "Excuse me, what gate?" I said, "Oh, over here, whatever, A12." He's like, "Okay." He goes, "Ontario?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, cool. You driving?" I'm like, "Uh-huh." He goes, "Cool. Hey, you smoke pot?"
What?
I look at him like, "Excuse me?" He goes, "You smoke pot?"
He actually asked you that?
Asked you that following you driving
Yeah.
question?
You smoke pot? I went, I'm driving the airplane. No, I don't smoke pot. He's like, "You do cocaine?"
Oh my gosh.
And I look around and I'm
He's
like,
getting better.
"Am I on camera here?" "You do cocaine, man?" I'm like, "No." He goes, "Don't lie to me."
Oh, I'd be like, I'm going to go get a piss test right now.
Yeah, and I'm like,
Right
okay,
now.
this guy, he's like, he gives me like the fist. He's like, "No, man, I'm just messing with you, man. I'm just messing with you." So I had this like 20-minute conversation with this guy I'm like, "Oh, what else am I going to do? I might as well be entertained."
Oh, that's funny though.
And he goes, you got a sister, man?" I was like, okay, I gotta
That's
go. I gotta go get ready. That plane's gonna be here any minute. He goes, "Hey, do I have time for a beer?" I'm like, I tell you what, if you find a place that's open for a beer, I think there's one in a different terminal somewhere. Go for it.
Don't get lost on the way back.
We'll be boarding in 40 minutes, but go for it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
man, it
funny
was
as
no
hell.
issue. He was just messing with me, and so yeah, you do cocaine.
Dude. Wow.
So yeah, 1.5 hour delay out of Dallas. Landed the next day, but unfortunately, it wasn't past 1 a.m. So yeah, tough trip. And I was thinking, welcome, Rob, to the Airbus.
I know. I've been reading all the social media platforms with what's going on in our company and industry, and it's just it's oh man, it's just there's a lot going on, with schedule changes and maintenance, and it's hard to I don't know, just find a normal sequence where you go to work, you take off on time, you land on time, there's no drama, and everybody's just, kumbaya along the way. So,
Yeah.
whether it's the meals, the masks, the delays, the maintenance, and all that, um, yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough.
Yeah.
And it's been nice to be in the schoolhouse for a month, kind of, separated from all that stuff for for about, 4 weeks, so I didn't have to deal with it.
Yeah. And Roger, you've been removed from the airline industry for a while, dealing with your corporate flying, and it's a completely different caliber of client. Do you ever deal with passengers that say weird things or things that happen to you while you're on a flight line that you're like, really?
I don't, but that's just because of the type of flying that I do, because I fly Part 91, which is basically private owners only. There's no you don't hold yourself out. We fly the same people on a daily, monthly, yearly basis. I think and so we're the same pilots, they're the same passengers. We all kind of know the score because it's the same people every time. I think that when you get different people and people that maybe don't do this all the time, and in the 135 world where you do more charter, where you get different people on the planes all the time, you're much more likely to get um, to get more unknowns um, than I do. I've been fortunate enough that I've never had to do the 135 passenger operations.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I say, when we're doing owner flights, it's the same people all the time. It's usually a known quantity. Yes, there's some alcohol, and they'll start singing and they're dancing or doing all kinds of things maybe a little outside the norm. But I've never been asked if I do cocaine. I mean, I can't say I've had anything like that happen at the airlines or otherwise.
Yeah. I mean, that really threw me for a loop. I was like,
I can only imagine sitting here, and I'd be like looking around like, okay, whoa, who's watching and what is happening right now?
Yeah. Remember a few years ago when when a bunch of alcoholic pilots made the headlines. There's always one every few years or something that makes the newspapers, but there was one or two that it was like 10 years ago or so, that from what I can remember, it was kind of a hot topic going around, and I was in Columbus, Ohio, getting ready to board to go back to Dallas. Actually, they're boarding. See, I was the FO, and some lady poked her head in the cockpit and said, "You two haven't been drinking, have you?" Just as a joke. And of course, the captain took it very seriously, and he's like, "You know what? I don't feel comfortable with that. I am removing myself from flight. I'm going to go get a drug and alcohol test right now, and just to prove that I didn't show up to work." And I'm like, you know what? That's probably a great idea in light of the situation. And so the flight was canceled because somebody's remark. But
just stuck their head up there and made an off-the-cuff remark.
And then we ended up ferrying the airplane back about 5-6 hours later. So
yeah, I remember that happened to me as well at Sandpiper, and it was the captain who immediately turned around and said, "Oh, are you serious?" And she's like, and he goes, she didn't respond, and he goes, "Well," he goes, "Okay." So he made a PA, just like you said, Rob. He goes, "Well, ladies and gentlemen, a passenger has accused me of drinking. And unfortunately, when that happens, that means that both flight crew members need to go and take a blood alcohol test. Those results usually take quite some time. And considering we're not at a base, this flight will probably be canceled. I hope that they rebook you on a flight as soon as possible. But we will be removing ourselves from the flight because of the accusation." And "Oh, I was kidding. He said, "No, well, it's too late." So sure enough, that flight got canceled. Like you said, Rob, it's not a joke. It's not a joke because we can go to federal prison for flying under the influence, and anybody that accuses us of that. Now, is that a little bit overboard? Sure, but it's to prove a point, and it unfortunately.
Well, I wouldn't say it's to prove a point. It's you never know how literally people take things. Like they could take things totally out of context. And that's how a lot of the media works. They have a comment, and then they use that comment and they take it totally out of context, and then they say, "Well, he said this." You know what I mean? And so if passenger pokes their head in the cockpit or anything, and right before you're about to launch, and jokingly ask you something, you have to really take that seriously, because they you never know who they're working for,
right?
Or everybody has a like you said, a movie studio in their pocket, or they could even be mic'd up and you not even know that. So
yeah,
it's dangerous. I mean, do I sound paranoid? I'm not paranoid. I'm just CYA. I've got I worked hard to get all my ratings and certificates, and
At the end of the day, that's what we do. We protect our certificate.
And then you have a bad day in the cockpit and you have a hard landing, or, something goes wrong with the airplane. And 3 hours ago, this guy just asked you if you were drinking or something like that. Now they're like, oh man, this guy must have been because he crashed the landing, or, it's like, dude, that sucks.
Or my favorite scenario, and we've kind of talked about this in previous shows, is, you do everything right. Okay. Some idiot back there joked around with you and it's like, oh, yeah. And so you do everything right. You get your taxiing into the gate, and some ramper or some guy in a tug doesn't see you and clips your wing. And now there's a fuel leak and a big emergency. And so now guess what happens to both pilots? They go and get blood alcohol test, right? Guess who's going to be on the 6 o'clock news going, well, I suspected they were drinking. I even made a comment to them before the flight, and they went anyway. And even though it couldn't be further from the truth, but sensationalism wins at the end of the day.
Definitely, man. Yep.
We've been talking about, playing jokes on flight crew and how we take things very seriously. There's certain things that I think, and we all agree, that we just don't joke around about. One, we don't joke around about alcohol or drugs in the flight deck. It's not something that is funny to us. Like Rob said, we've worked very, very hard to accomplish all these ratings and certificates, and to have it all in question by a passenger who's trying to make a funny. It's not good. It's not respected. It's not welcomed. The other thing we don't joke around about is money. You pay me what we're due. We don't joke around about money. Fly the contract. The contract is there for a reason, so that it keeps everybody honest and it protects us. And the other thing we don't joke around about is like fire. We don't say like fire or bomb or anything like that. We don't joke around about that kind of stuff. There's part of being a professional aviator. Passengers, unfortunately, don't always get that. And recently, what made headlines was an article that I saw this morning. Rob and I were talking about this earlier. From viewfromthewing.com, there was an article that was posted on July 20th from Gary Leff. An American Airlines gate agent fires a customer. It's like, wait a minute. I was like, how does that work? And there's a little video. Now, I guess what happened was the customer was being rude towards the gate agent. Supervisor was called over, and how he handled the situation is to be very much respected. He didn't go overboard. Now, what he said probably got him at least a slap on the wrist, because he was a little disparaging towards another airline. But I have some audio on that, and I'd like to play that for you.
Second of all, you called my employee a bitch. Completely uncalled for, inappropriate, you're not going to travel. We don't tolerate that crap with us at all. So you can find another carrier to fly. I'd suggest Spirit. Nope. If you acted appropriate and you weren't disrespectful, then I would let you travel. But unfortunately, you called my employee a bitch. Did you call my employee a bitch? You didn't.
I was standing there. No, I did not.
You didn't. So the other people have heard you say it as well. So don't count. Yeah, she also had 2 children. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, don't lie, because you already did that once when you took the mask off and put a new one of yours on.
I was getting this out of my bag. Yes, I was.
You were putting the same mask on. You didn't have a mask on when you went down.
So it goes on for a little while longer, and he never raises his voice more than that. And I got to say, that's kind of hard to do. I could never do a gate agent's job.
That's a tough job, man.
I could not do it. I can't do it. I'd be arrested. But yeah, I mean, kudos to him, though, for standing up for the work group.
His company. Yeah.
His company over there at American. I got a lot of respect for that airline. And when I hear things like this, that they've defended themselves against an unruly passenger who was, of course, now that she realized that she wasn't going to fly, I didn't say that. It's like, well, it's the minute you get kids involved, there were kids in the area, they heard you cuss. No, you're out of here. So
Yeah.
good job to them.
You did good.
Now let's move forward. Rob, I'm really excited to hear about your type ride event. Now, we talked about on the onset of the show how for 4 weeks you've been drinking from the fire hose. You've been over at the Planet Killer Base, as we like to call the Death Star area.
The Death Star,
Death Star, where we train.
Schoolhouse.
The schoolhouse, yeah. So you went through those experiences, and you actually gave us a little bit on the pre-show about some of the experiences that you had for your type ride. Now, we know that you were paired up with another first officer for this training event. So first officer. So in the simulator and in the training, the trainer, you would have to spend half your time in the right seat doing all the duties that you were being trained to do. And the other time you were in the left seat, going through the motions of what the captain would be doing or the pilot monitoring would be doing from the left seat. So actually, I believe that there's good in that there is. You have to switch your motor skills, and you're not just doing muscle memory, and you're actually physically and mentally really thinking about what you're supposed to be doing. I think that is a better learning experience. Some people say that's negative learning because I'm not in the left seat. Why should I be sitting in the left seat? I should be in the right seat for everything. There can be points made to that as well. But I honestly think that that's a little bit more difficult to switch seats like that. When it came time to getting since we have AQP, your maneuvers validation, your LOE, and your RAD, that 2 to 3 day event is really what consists of what we would call a check ride. Yep. How did your experience go in that process?
Overall, it was great. The instructors, the checked airmen, and the sim instructors and the ground school instructors at our schoolhouse are the best in the industry. They're really good, and I really mean that. They do a really good job. They have a lot of information that they have to teach over a 4-week period, and they do it in a really good building block style of learning. So basics, and then you build upon what you learned yesterday and you continue on. But like you said, there's a lot of information, and the student has to put forth their time with studying and doing a lot of rote memory and chair flying and stuff like that. So as long as you do your part, and they do their part, which they did, it all comes together at the end. So the last 3 days, like you spoke, were the AQP versions of a check ride. So it started off with maneuvers validation, which basically sum it up in a nutshell. You go out and perform the maneuvers that are required, like single engine takeoff and landings, wind shear, ground proximity warning stuff, TCAS resolution alerts. So you go through all these scenarios that you have to demonstrate proficiency in. And so that lasts about 2 hours each person. So me and my sim partner were paired up for that, and we're both FOs. So he had like you said, he was captain for me, and then we switched seats 2 hours later, and then I was captain for him. So powered through that. That was pretty straightforward. Great event. Really solidifies how much you've absorbed over the last 4 weeks in just demonstrating that you can do the maneuvers without any coaching or anything. So that was nice. Next day is the LOE, which is line oriented evaluation, right? So basically it's training, but it's checking. So they simulate a flight from point A to point B, and they want to see how you handle all the scenarios with headings, intercepting radials, holdings, malfunctions, and stuff like that in a flight from point A to point B. So treat it like a real flight, like there's real people behind you, and go up and do it. So again, that was straightforward, piece of cake. There's a couple of hiccups along the way that there's a lot of things that they introduce to you even at that point that you haven't seen in your whole training, because it doesn't really pertain to the training. It's just something that you just need to see when it happens, and you go out there and do it, like the box stuff, uplinks and stuff like that. So anyway, that day was pretty straightforward. And then the last day, which is what they call the loft, line-oriented flight training, which is, again, simulating a flight from point A to point B, and then turning around, doing a turn, and going back to, another airport, which is like a typical day on the flight line for us, except this time they're really hands-off, and you just go out and do it. So since my sim partner wasn't a captain, I had to have a seat fill, which is training term for somebody who is a captain who wasn't training with me, who's sitting in and filling the captain's role in my loft. So this particular pilot is a check airman. So he's another instructor at the schoolhouse, and he was hired to sit and be my captain for my my loft, my basically check ride, like we've been saying.
Yeah.
And so there was a little conversation that my training, my seat fill check airman, and the actual check airman that was running the show, who was actually checking the event, had when we went through our performance review. Performance meaning the airplane's weight, takeoff weight, pertaining to the runway and single engine climb and climb limited and all that stuff. So we had a runway change. And we also had a weight change, and we were 2,000 pounds heavier than what we planned, which for our plans, our planning purposes, we have to redo our performance and get new performance numbers. So as I reviewed it, I discovered that we were heavier. So I went down into the MCDU in the airplane, and was getting ready to extract the information out of the box with a new TPS. And the guy running the show, the check airman running the show, he's like, "Hey, wait a minute, what are you doing?" I was like, "Well, I'm requesting a new TPS from the box." And he's like, "Well, all you have to do is just uplink the speeds." And I was like, "But we're heavier than our plan. I mean, we're heavier than our assumed takeoff weight. We need to get a new TPS, and that's method 1 in our blue pages." And he goes, no, just uplink the runway change, put the new runway in there, and then request, then uplink the new speeds for the new runway. And I'm like, but those numbers don't apply to us anymore, because those uplink speeds were when I originally uplinked, the flight plan to the airplane. And that was when the dispatcher did his flight planning. So now that we're heavier than what the flight plan was planned at, we need to have new numbers. We need new TPS numbers. And he goes, no, you just uplink the new runway speeds. And I looked at my seat fill check airman, and I'm like, that doesn't seem right to me. I said, I mean, if that's what you're telling me to do, I'm going to cooperate and graduate and just do what you tell me to do. But
Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to learn. I don't want to have a negative, transfer of learning here. I want to make sure that I'm doing it right, because, this whole time reading the book and doing it on the 7.3, this is what you do. You get new numbers. And so the check airman kind of looked over his shoulder, and he's like, "Yeah, he's right. We need to get new TPS numbers, because we are heavier than 2,000 pounds, which brings us above our assume." And so these guys just started going back and forth on the performance stuff and how to do it, where to get the numbers. And I just kind of sat back and just kind of listened in my left ear, waiting for them to come up with a resolution to how we're supposed to do this. And crazy enough, the speeds really only change by 1 or 2 knots anyway. It's right. Yeah, measuring it with a laser, marking it with a grease pencil, cutting it with an axe.
Yeah.
But to fulfill, the performance review part, 91, 61, whatever it is, 121 certification, you have to know your performance for that runway.
Sure.
And so since we didn't have it, because we were outside of that weight window, we needed to get a new one. And finally, after about 15, 20 minutes of this conversation, he's like, well, just go ahead and just use the uplink speeds because we don't have time to go through all that other stuff. I'm like, and he's like, we'll talk about it again in the debrief. I'm like, all right, sounds good. Hi, she's back. Anyway, that was the beginning of the check ride, or the beginning of that one event. So he was kind of the guy running the show was kind of, I wouldn't say his cage was rattled, but he was thrown off his rhythm, so to speak. And then I didn't mention this in the pre-show, but also I guess this was a fairly new event for this guy. So I guess he hadn't been doing this this scenario very much. So he was trying to read it by a script, and he may have went past something or missed it. But anyway, so as we took off, everything was fine, started climbing. I think it was out of Boston, and he needed us to level off at like 5,000 feet, and we had already climbed through 5,000 feet. And so he's like, level maintain 5,000. So we were like, okay, leveling at 6,000, descending back down to 5,000. So we leveled back, descended back down to 5,000 feet, and everything is like, okay, now you're cleared to flight level 230. All right, fine. Open climb, flight level 230. Here we go. So not open climb, managed climb to flight level 230. So we started climbing out 250 knots from 5,000. And as you go through 10,000 feet, normally with the planes, the way it's programmed, it'll start accelerating to its climb speed, which is faster than 250 knots. Usually goes to what, 290, whatever, 300 something.
300, 320, something, whatever.
Yeah, whatever it's programmed to do for the best climb speed. So we get through 10,000, and I'm looking, and I'm like, this thing is not accelerating. It's still at 250 knots. And I looked at the FCU. I'm like, well, I looked at my FMA. I'm like, we're not in selected speeds, and we're in managed climb and managed speeds. This thing should be accelerating right now. So I looked over at my seat fill captain. I'm like, is there something that I'm missing here? Everything's managed. Why is this airplane not accelerating past 250 knots? So he looks down at the box, he looks at the FMA, looks at the FCU, and he's like, I don't know why. It's not, he's like, I can't figure it out myself. And he starts hitting, goes to the prog, I think it's the prog page in the box, which tells you what mode you're in. Mm-hmm. And he goes, for some reason, it's in the descent mode. And I'm like, well, Jesus, we should be climbing at least, So everybody's head kind of got a little wrapped around that for a little while. And they were like, he's like, oh, and I said, we actually climbed through 5,000 feet, leveled off at 6, and then descended back down to 5,000 because of the clearance. Would that have put the box back in a descent mode? And he goes, that's exactly what it was. Good catch. So he recruises the box at whatever altitude we were at, and then we just kept climbing, and put the plane went back into a climb mode, which then accelerated to whatever 310 knots. Yeah. And so I'm like, geez, man, this check ride's going great right now. I'm like, oh man, we're gonna have a lot to talk about when we get to the.
But you're catching everything, so I mean,
that's great. Exactly what he said. He's like, that's and that's how it is for pretty much every checking event, whether it's Roger, Tony, whatever airplane you fly. We use the acronym, and we use it on the 175 at Sandpiper, CAMI. Confirm, activate, monitor, and intervene if you have to. So, confirm what you're doing. Check with your co-pilot, make sure this is what you want, or this is what the clearance was. Activate it, and then monitor, the aircraft systems and navigation, and make sure it's doing what you wanted it to do. Yeah. And if it doesn't, you have to intervene and do something different to get it to do what you want. So that's what we basically had to do the whole time.
What's it doing?
Big brake, pull up. Big brake, pull up.
Ladies and gentlemen, fasten your seatbelt now. Fasten your seatbelt securely now.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, as Tony, and Roger, when you're in the training world, you don't spend much time above 5,000 feet, in the simulator. So everything's approaches, returning back, missed approach, holding. So you never really, flex the airplane's capabilities above 10,000 feet and really see how the VNAV's going to work vertically, accelerating and you understand in theory and, on the 7.3 and the 175, all the VNAV stuff are cool, and I've seen it. I know how it works, and I totally understand it. And with that knowledge, you know how the Airbus is supposed to work now too, because you just went through 4 weeks of training, but you just haven't really seen it happen.
Yeah.
So, and then you're getting all these distractors with headings and holds and airspeeds and all that stuff, and next thing you know, you get an ECAM malfunction, and you have to deal with that, and you can get pretty busy up there, especially with a new guy like me. You can get what we call into the yellow pretty quick. As long as you kind of, I've learned to do the Airbus kind of pace. If something happens, bing, sit back, take a puff from your cigarette. All right, we got a generator 2 fault. Take another puff from your cigarette. All right, yeah, that's not an immediate action or quick action or a ECAM exception. All right, who's gonna fly this one? All right, well, you're doing good. Why don't you keep flying? All right, yeah, you do that. All right, who's gonna talk on the radios? All right, you do that too. All right,
Hey,
take another.
Rob, you smoke pot?
Yeah, right. We just
That's
talked
exactly
about
what I was thinking.
It's French, so you're always smoking a cigarette.
I can't
so.
condone smoking because it's not allowed on the flight deck.
Well, why do we have ashtrays? No, just kidding.
Well, it used to be. I've heard stories. I've seen some things. I've seen a thing or two.
Man.
Dun, 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 dun. No.
Yeah, so anyway, that was that, and we landed, turned the airplane around, had another malfunction, diverted, landed, and as I landed, pulled off to the unnamed taxiway in Richmond because there was no sign saying, this taxiway Yankee or Bravo. Cleared the runway. I was like, hey, yeah, tower, is Mayday American 7, 320 or whatever. Just exited off an unnamed taxiway. We're going to stop here and run a checklist. He's like, all right, roger that. Just as soon as that happened, the printer message came off the printer. Congrats, welcome to the Airbus.
That's so
I was like,
cool.
Yay!
Nice.
So yeah, that was that. So it was fun, exciting. I'm happy to get that behind me. Sorry for the long-winded story, but I was a little excited to share with you.
Congratulations to Rob,
Yay.
the newest
Thank
of
you.
the Airbus pilots.
Hoorah!
So congratulations. I can't wait to cross paths with you out on the flight line. I am in Dallas now quite a bit, flying out of Ontario, so there's no reason why that can't happen. You got IOE coming up now.
I do.
Initial operating experience. So you're a full-fledged Airbus pilot. You have your FAA certificate. At least you're temporary, and as we discussed, 2 or 3 shows ago, your temporary is good for 120 days, and if you don't get it by 90 days, make sure you make some phone calls or go online and check the status. However, you've got this. You go out, tomorrow? For IOE?
I did head out Friday, tomorrow, the 23rd. My trip actually starts on Saturday, the 24th, with a 2-leg trip from Charlotte to Dallas to Salt Lake City. So that's going to be perfect because, they're long legs, and you really get to ease into the operation. Obviously, it's going to be my first time flying the real airplane outside of the simulator. So just don't tell all those passengers that, because I'm sure they'll freak out. But so that'll be the first trip, and it's a 4-day trip. I only need 15 hours. But the trip is scheduled for like 21 or 22 hours. So I'll have plenty of time to at least get the 15 hours. And that's the minimum. So obviously if I don't meet or exceed the check airman's expectations or my expectations, then we could always add on more. But typically, 15 hours is all it's going to take.
Nice.
Yeah, fired up, ready to do it, ready to
So-
really put it to use.
So at the airlines, we do this initial operating experience, but in a Part 91 world, this doesn't exist. You get your type rating, and the very next day, you could go up.
Let's go.
Let's go by yourself. Yeah.
Just do it.
And Roger,
Just do it.
last time you were on the show, we were talking about you had just completed a type rating in the Falcon EZ, right?
The Falcon 900 Easy, correct.
The 900 EZ. Now, have you had a chance to fly that particular aircraft as a PIC since your type rating?
No, the plane's actually not even around right now.
Oh,
It's in its C check right now, and
okay.
so it won't be getting out for probably another month or so.
Yeah.
So I haven't even seen the airplane,
Now you
which
have
we knew going into it.
Yeah. Now you have flown since our last show. You had the wedding. You
Yes.
had that event that you went up and you got to do some rafting, and which is super cool. One of these days, I'm gonna I'm gonna take you up with me. We're gonna go do
You're gonna
some
put your life in my hands again.
abso-freaking-lutely. And I look forward to that. But what kind of flying have you been doing in the
So,
interim?
for the last, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks, I haven't done a whole lot of flying. I had that personal stuff in between. It's actually been more personally busy in this little bit of flying break that I've had. Most of the stuff that I've done has been, I think it's actually all been inter California. I've gone up and back to Truckee a few times. I went to Napa just 2 days ago.
Nice.
A day trip to Napa. So hung out up there for a day. And other than that, I'm sure I've done something else, but now you're getting back a couple weeks. It's been Truckee, multiple flights to Truckee and back.
So you leave Gillespie early in the morning, fly up to Truckee, and then your clients, obviously they have a car or what have you, pick them up. They're off on their own. Walk us through what you do once you park the aircraft, run your shutdown checklist. The customer leaves. What's involved from that point forward?
Well, the interesting part of that question is you've kind of completely skipped all of the work that I do. Because all of the work that we do actually is figuring out what you're going to do once you park the airplane and put the parking brake on. So we'll kind of back that up a little bit, because unlike, at the airlines, you have these personnel and departments that are going to do this stuff actually for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so in this case, the Truckee trip was actually a little bit interesting because I did some initial work. We were going to be there for 2 nights. Actually, it's just going to be me. The other pilot was going to airline home because I had one pilot flying up with me, and then another pilot was going to be going back. And so first thing is we got to figure out where we're going to stay. And then second step is how are we going to get to where we're going to stay? And so the first thing I did was look at hotels, and in this case, the hotels were extremely expensive. In my case, I have family that's down in Sacramento, which is an hour and a half, 140 drive or so. And so I was like, well, I can maybe go down to Sacramento. The hotels are only they were 25% of what they were going to be charging up in Truckee. Except then the problem was, how are we going to get there? And this process started 5 days prior to the trip, because when you're going into towns like this, especially Truckee in the last decade or so, the Bay Area has inundated the area, and it's a big tourist. And so there's not that's why the hotels are expensive. And then there were no cars. So I called up a car rental place, and they didn't have anything. And then fortunately, they actually called me back about 8 hours later, and I grabbed a car. And so what we did at that point, we parked the airplane and we got the car, and then we drove an hour and a half down to Sacramento, and I dropped the other pilot off at the airport. And then I kind of started my layover, if you will, for a couple nights before then picking up the other pilot 2 days later, and then driving all the way back up to Truckee to do that outbound flight. So it's kind of a little bit different, because the flying the airplane for us is obviously our primary job, but we have other primary jobs as well, because we're responsible for all the logistics And then obviously once you start doing the international stuff, that only, increases by a factor of 2 or 3.
Yeah. Yeah,
Wow.
and we take that for granted, I think, for those that, went from either the military to the airlines or from, flight instruction to a regional and then to a major. We never really see that portion, all the logistics, like you said, that are involved. And, that's always something that's been so interesting to me. And I've always said this every time we get together, man, you work way too hard.
It's kind of, even while we've been sitting here for, a couple hours now, I've gotten multiple text messages and emails that I need to get back to that are coming in, most of it all international related, because those responsibilities without, the 121, I mean, whole departments that are responsible for doing that, it's just us. And so I've got some work to do as soon as we get off of that, kind of for that kind of stuff as well. And it's just like the logistics, especially depending on where you're going, can get somewhat complex.
So let me ask you a question. When you're thinking about these things, cars, hotels, things like that, and I guess you'd also have to cater the airplane for the
and we're responsible for the catering if that's
so you have to think about where you're going to get all that. What kind of parameters do you guys do you set, or do you have anything set for hotels, rental cars? I mean, if you show up and they don't have any, economy cars, are you guys regulated to like a compact, or I mean, stuff like that? A hotel, can it be a 5-star hotel, or does it have to be a
moving target? We have general guidelines that we are supposed to stick within, and like my personal policy, which I think has kind of allowed me some freedom, but it's basically, I try and stay within that framework. And if I can't, I'm going to go and I'm going to get permission, or I'm going to say, hey, look, this is what's going on. And then I'll get permission, because there are times, obviously, if these people are
now the permission, does it come from the owner?
I follow the chain of command, for lack of better terms.
Okay,
I go to our quote unquote chief pilot, director of operations, whatever you want to call him. And then he can go and he can give me the yay or nay, and he can go talk to the owners. I do not go to the owners. I
understand.
I don't need to get into the office politics, if you will. But I'll get the okay from our director of operations, because he's the one that in the end kind of pays all the bills and passes that on to the owners. And for the most, I've never had a problem with it, because I think for the most part that the owners realize that when they're operating, with multi-million-dollar budgets for this airplane, even if I end up having to get a hotel at $500 a night, in the end, that's not going to get noticed, a few times a year. But I always respect the fact and remember that I am employed by these people, and I'm spending their money. And if I'm going to spend their money, I want to actually, be
respectful
of the fact that even though I charge, tens of thousands of dollars, that's not my money, and be responsible and respectful of that.
So that brings up another question for me. When you refuel the airplane, what's the biggest price tag you've seen on a fill up? And because I don't know, Tony, I don't know if
what's the going rate?
I haven't put any gas in an airplane since 2005, so I don't know.
That's another thing, that from a logistics standpoint, how to get around some of that. We have. We're actually a member of something called CAA's, Corporate Aircraft Association. And when we're planning out, there are specific airports and FBOs at specific airports that have a much better fuel rate. And so we always try to hit those up at the places where where they are not a member of CAA. Then we are going to try and get some contract fuel. In some places there is not contract fuel, and we try and tanker fuel, and all of that is done, prior. Unfortunately, Napa being an example, I tankered fuel because fuel up there was over $6.50 a gallon.
So you decide to tanker it yourself? Those are part of the logistic things that you have to decide.
I make the decision to tanker it on my own, typically.
There's a lot of decisions going on.
There's a lot of decisions that are going on, especially when you first start. As you kind of go, you'll learn where you got to watch out for.
Sure.
but that is something that you're going to need to look up and kind of verify before you go, because the last thing I want to do is end up having to answer a question. Okay, well, I mean, you can go to places where fuel is $7 plus a gallon. And when you're talking about putting, anywhere between 300 and 1,300 gallons of fuel, that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Typically we're spending about $4 a gallon now. Fuel's gone up. I don't know if you guys are even aware of it. But
No, we
fuel's
don't.
gone back
That's
up. When I first started a year
Yeah.
ago, we were probably playing on an average. We were probably playing close to maybe $3.25 a gallon. It's probably gone up to $3.75 to $4 a gallon now on an average across the entire, operation.
Mm.
But you go to some places, big international airports. If I were to fly into DFW, you really got to be careful of those.
Yeah.
Windbird, I mean, they'll charge you $8 a gallon.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now you're talking a difference of $4 a gallon, and I'm gonna be the one that's gonna have to explain that.
Yeah. Double the
Yeah.
cost. Yeah.
$7 a gallon is probably the biggest one that I've had to
Same.
do. But again, you've tried to mitigate that, and okay, maybe I only got to put 300 gallons on and get a $2,100 fuel bill. But that 300 gallons isn't going to go more than an hour's flight either.
$2,100 just out the tailpipe.
There it goes. Pretty quick.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, that
Yeah.
$500 a night hotel room doesn't seem quite so bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not so bad.
But again, it's that fiduciary responsibility that I try and go, no matter who I'm
Yeah.
flying for, at any job. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of things that are going on before the flight leaves. But if in our operation, it's a little weird. And in our operation, most of my work is done by the time I show up at the airplane and start the APU. Most of my job is done. Then it's the easy part, and then it's just flying the airplane. You guys, that's all you. That's
Yeah.
all you guys.
We
are-
only
are
do the
really
fun
doing.
stuff and complain about
Yeah.
everything.
Right.
Yeah, everything else is already there.
So there is definitely a big difference there, but a lot of
Sure.
it is pre-trip planning on multiple fronts.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now,
That's cool, man.
and you mentioned, tankering fuel and having to always have consideration to what your flight planning is going to be for the day or for the week. Do you ever deal with, I know we mentioned earlier, cost index. Cost index on the Airbus is something that can be adjusted. Usually the flight planning dispatcher will put a cost index on the aircraft anywhere from 1 to 99. Lately, we've been seeing cost indexes of 3 because they're trying to
Wow.
save fuel. So, but most of the time you see a cost index of like 20 or 30. And all that is tells the flight management system how to save fuel. Maybe climb out at a different rate or a different speed so you get up to altitude faster, and then maybe have your cruise speed be a little bit lower, maybe 7.6 instead of 8.2. So the cost index is adjusted per flight, and we for a time we're not allowed to manipulate that. And if we did, we had to have a good reason. Like, is the flight late? Are you trying to make up time? Trying to get the people there on time? So you can manipulate it. Now they say, okay, you can manipulate it if it's in an effort for safety of flight or for weather or for trying to get people there on time if you're behind schedule. But for the most part, they want you to stick to the predetermined cost index of the aircraft. With that said, since you guys are operating on a Part 91 for clients, is it always go, 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 get there as quickly as you can? Or do you also consider fuel burn and the efficiency of a flight and maybe dial it back a little bit?
So there's a couple different thoughts that go into that. The general answer to your question is no, we go fast. We'll go 8.3 to 8.5 pretty much anywhere unless we need to conserve fuel for the length of the flight. Part of the reason for that, and this I don't know how the airlines work it, but part of the reasons is that it's not all about fuel because, for a couple different reasons. Number one, we only fly, a tiny fraction of the amount of flights that a big airline does. If you look at, if you're going to save, maybe 50 gallons of fuel on a flight, maybe 50, maybe 100, depending on the length of it, 50 gallons for anybody is not all that much. But when you take it by the sheer amount of flights, 50 gallons of flight for what? one of the big legacy airlines does is a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
50 gallons of flight for what we do is not nearly as much, just because we don't do nearly as much of it. So that's number one. And number two, and this was what I don't know what the airlines do, is we pay for engine reserves and engine maintenance.
Mhm.
We pay a rather substantial amount of money every single hour that engine's running. So the faster we go, we actually are going to save money on engine maintenance because we pay hourly.
Yeah.
It's actually it's a little over $2,000 an hour in engine maintenance. That's for both of them.
Whoa.
Actually, it's for
Wow.
all three of them, the APU and the two engines.
Hmm.
So if we actually fly faster, we're actually saving money on what's called the MSP program. And so you're actually got a little cost benefit, analysis no matter which way you go. Fuel is cheap compared to the operating costs of those engines. And so go fast.
Yeah.
And because it's cool.
Yeah, and it's cool.
It's
Yeah.
cool.
So yeah, we
Nice.
typically go 8.3. I'd go 8.5 if I could, except in that particular, in the 2000 that I normally fly, doesn't have auto throttles. And so if I'm trying to go 8.5 right at the top,
You're constantly manipulating.
I'm manipulating so I don't get the ding 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 for the overspeed. So I give myself a little buffer at 8.3.
There you go. Oh, excellent.
Nice.
Well, we talked about doing pre-flights and finding issues with the aircraft before or after a flight. Pre-flights are absolutely crucial. We've been toting that line now for years here on the show. But one of the most important tools that any pilot can have in their arsenal resides usually in their kit bag. And that is a very good flashlight for a walk around. Now, over the years and over the decades, I've seen everything from D-cell mag lights to little pen lights and little keychain LED lights, and now even people using the flashlight on their cell phone. And granted, cell phone flashlights are relatively bright nowadays, but there's a standard that the companies that we work for usually like to see. And that standard is usually some kind of torchlight that can illuminate the outside of the aircraft enough for you to do a thorough pre-flight. Now, that is a very open-ended, open for interpretation thing. Now, they're not regulating what kind of flashlight, how many lumens it has to have, all these, nice little bells and whistles. But what I've discovered, about 10 years ago, I ordered online a flashlight. It was like a tactical flashlight. It wasn't anything big deal, but it was made out of metal. And it had a USB charging port. So the batteries that it came with, the nickel-cadmium batteries, were rechargeable, which meant I didn't have to worry about lugging around batteries all the time. I could just plug it in on a layover, and in the morning it would be charged. And depending on how many night flights I operated that month, I'd have to charge it maybe once or twice. I've since, purchased a few more flashlights along the way, but every single time, my criteria is two things: has to be a rechargeable flashlight, so I don't have to sit there and buy batteries. And I like the flashlights that have a focused head on them, that I am looking at the tail of the aircraft. I can focus the head and make more of a beam and kind of shoot the light up to the tip of the horizontal or the vertical stabilizers. And then when I am down low and I'm looking at like wheel well, for example, I just spin the head, and now I've got a wide angle beam and it illuminates a wider area. It's a softer light, and I can take a look and can see any kind of damage or leaks are much easier to find. And there really doesn't need to be a high ticket cost on these flashlights. You could buy the Surefire for $100+, but everything I've always purchased is under $20, and I'm perfectly happy with it. Roger, what do you use for your pre-flight on your corporate jets? I thought you were...
I use two. I have two flashlights. I use the one from the airplane, and I got my cell phone.
There you go.
There you go.
Two-fisted.
Same time. Same
That's
time.
what most people do, right? Now, typically, we don't fly at night all that often. I do use my cell phone, actually, for the flashlight. Don't use the one from the airplane. You're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, if it's
For
emergency
all those people
equipment.
listening.
Yeah, if it's emergency equipment, if your aircraft deems the flashlight that's on the flight deck or in the cabin as emergency equipment, don't use it.
Don't use it.
Don't use it. If it's
I
not
think
emergency equipment, then okay.
I think it is probably better generally, especially if you're flying at night regularly, to actually have a decent flashlight. We just don't fly at night all that often. Pretty much almost never in the summertime. I'm not gonna lie. I use the cell phone, and like you said at the beginning, those actually do work pretty well, except for the really high up surfaces. But really, I don't think that a flashlight's gonna help me see all that much better anyway.
Yeah.
For something that far away.
Well, your aircraft is not that tall. I mean, you're pretty much.
It's not as tall. It's not nearly as tall as your guys' either.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a fairly substantial size, but nothing near the size of what you guys are flying.
Yeah. And Rob, what about yourself? Do you have the 5-cell D-cell mag light that weighs 50 pounds?
No. Yeah, the 6 double D battery ones. No, I just sent you a link to the one I use. It's called the Olight. It's really cool. I got it as a gift for Christmas from my family, and it's literally, 4 inches or so, tiny, rechargeable LED, very powerful. I mean, blinding. It's incredible how powerful it is. But the nice thing is that it's so tiny, and it has a little shirt clip on it, which I don't use it on my shirt, but when I put it in my bag, it just just sits perfectly in one of the little compartments. And you rarely I maybe have to charge it every 3 or 4 months because you don't use it that much, like you guys talk about. And even as the battery level goes down, it won't let you go into the brightest setting, so it'll go down to like the medium setting. But even at the medium setting, it's really bright, and I forget how many lumens it says it is. Which
I just looked it up actually. It's
pretty bright.
The S1R2 Olight black bundle and 1,000 lumens.
Yeah, that's pretty good for a little light.
Has a beam distance of over 476 feet. It's got a magnetic USB charging base. Max light intensity is 5,250 candela, whatever that means. And it's a high performance CW LED with TIR optic lenses. That's a pretty nifty light you got there.
I think
it's not bad.
LED lights have really, they use a lot less electricity, so you can get that easy charging capability, but also
it's come a long way.
Yeah.
And like Tony said, it has a magnetic bottom to it, so if there's like I'm working on my car or whatever, you can boom, stick it to the the hood of the car and it stays there. And then with the clip, if you put it on your hat, if you're working, or if you lose all the lights in the cockpit for some reason, you can just put it on your headset frame, and then wherever you look, it'll light it up. But it works pretty good, man.
Yeah. I got this little handheld job here, and it's Amazon.
That's sweet.
Made in China, probably. Who knows? But yeah, it's got the adjustable magnetic on it.
Beam.
I think it's about 800 lumens. I mean, it's pretty bright. It'll blind anyone. And it's got the push button on/off on the back. It's allegedly tactical, but it's not sharpened. But anyway,
nice.
And this little thing
uses his flashlight more than the rest of us combined, though.
Yes,
Rob,
I know.
With
our red eyes,
red eye flights.
Yeah, and if you're looking for a flashlight and you're on the Airbus, just before you sit in the seat, recline it all the way and stick your hand in the crack between the seat and the back. I guarantee there's at least 1 or 2 flashlights down there. Yeah.
Oh, the compartment. Okay.
Lean your seat back and just stick your hand down the crack. I'm not sure if that's.
Should I wear gloves before I do that?
But,
should I ask permission?
I would wear gloves. So the seat back reclines on the Airbus.
Yes.
And a lot of people put their flashlight in their back pocket after they're done with their post-flight. And what happens is, as soon as you sit down, the flashlight falls out of the pocket, and it goes in between the seat cushion and the seat back. And there's like a
Right.
little, if you lean the seat
Hand.
all the way back, there's like a little
Exposes it.
and you can stick your hand in there, and I guarantee you there's gonna be a flashlight in there. I've turned in so many flashlights in a Lost and Found, it's not even funny. This one here, the Lux Pro, it's my backup, and this one's a little narrower, it's a little skinnier, and this one not as fancy as the other one, my primary, and it has like a low, medium, and high setting on it, but same idea, really nice flashlight.
Yeah.
This one does not have rechargeable. This is just a plain old flashlight. That's why it's my backup. But yeah, a good flashlight is key to find those little popped rivets that we were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. And and that's something we actually were trained to do in the military during whenever we did inspections, is to use a high powered flashlight because you see deficiencies better, or defects better, especially when you're inspecting a intake, fan blades and rotors and stators. You'd be amazed how much you miss without a good flashlight lighting up the focused area.
Excuse me, Captain. I know this may sound silly, but can you fly? Nope. Never had a lesson.
Recently on a lot of the forums that we're on for work online, a lot of groups, first officers that have created a page for Legacy Airlines and, pilots in general. There's a page just for captains. There's a page just for the cool kids, and so there's a page for everything. And lately, there's been a debate on sunshades. What kind of sunshades do you use on the flight deck? Do you use sunshades or do you prefer sunglasses? Do you use sunglasses or do you prefer wearing a baseball cap? And so we wanted to kind of just scratch the surface on a debate here on what's the best thing to use. Now, I guess it depends on your equipment and what your company provides. Our company doesn't provide anything other than what is built into the aircraft in terms of a sunshade, which if any Airbus pilot can tell you is a very small piece of plastic that's been tinted that is adjustable, and you can adjust it in the flight deck to keep the sun out of your eyes. Now, sunglasses on a flight deck that's like a glass cockpit in out there in a narrow body aircraft, kind of hard to focus on the instrumentation, because what happens is the sunshades work great when you're looking outside, but the minute you adjust and look inside, everything just got darker. And to top it off, we even have regulations that state that we should not be wearing any kind of polarized sunglasses because they'll black out some of the instrumentation.
Yeah.
So polarized glasses are out. Good luck finding sunglasses that are not polarized, that don't just darken the shit out of everything. So sunglasses versus baseball hat. Now, we were talking about wearing sunscreen on the flight deck. It does get bright up there. We are at higher elevations, so the intensity of the UV light is much stronger. And even though the glass of the aircraft, including the passenger cabin, they're all UV coated, but you're still going to get sunburn. You're still going to get exposure, and you're still going to need to protect your eyes.
Yeah.
I personally carry around some of those expandable sunshades that just stick to the glass and you can see through them. Yeah. Mine were like $12 on Amazon, and I love them. They're small. They're smaller than what they would be like in a vehicle. You can see through them, and all they're doing is they're blocking out some of the light, and I can adjust them around the flight deck, whether that's the side window or the front window. Now, clearly I don't use anything below 18,000 feet because we're dealing with traffic and we're not in RVSM airspace yet. So I just kind of grin and bear it until I get to altitude, and then I set up my nest and put the sunshades around. And I have enough to share. I usually, if the captain doesn't have anything, most of the time the captain has something, whether that's a chart that they put up, which I don't really recommend because that really...
The
Captain's Atlas, that's what it's for, right? To block the sun. But you can't see through that. Some people just have car sunshades, the kind you put on your dash when you park your car. Again, you can't really see through that. So what do you use, Rob?
Well, for optics, because I wear glasses, I have what do you call them? Transition lenses on here. So these turn colors. However, as anybody who owns transition lenses knows, they don't they don't darken unless they're in direct sunlight. So in a cockpit where it's really bright and you're looking outside and it's really bright, the lenses do tint a little bit, but not enough to be considered sunglasses in the cockpit. So I have I've just got a new prescription because I just had my eye exam in May, and I do own a pair of prescription sunglasses. They're Oakley's, and they have a orange tint to them. And I personally I prefer the I don't even know if it's called the orange tint, but the lenses that have the orange colored tint as opposed to like to the gray tint. For me, it just the fidelity is much clearer. And the reason why is when I first started flight training, I asked somebody about sunglasses, and the first thing that they said was Serengeti sunglasses.
Oh,
The lenses are really good, and and then I asked another pilot, "What do you recommend?" Serengetis. I was like, "Wow, that seems to be a common thread." And you figure you hear Ray-Ban, Oakley, or stuff like that, and those do come up, and those are really good glasses too. I actually have a pair of Ray-Bans that I wear normally just when I'm out driving around or even in my boat, and those are polarized. But in the airplane, like you said, you don't want polarized lenses, and Serengeti specialize in non-polarized lenses. So these things were great. But the one thing that was so awesome for me was when you put these glasses on, they had the orange tint to them. It seemed like everything just turned high definition all of a sudden. The fidelity was just so clear. And when you're flying around and you got all these glares and the clouds, they have all of a sudden the clouds have contrast to them. So the dark in the clouds are darker and the lights are lighter, but they're just very clear. And I almost relate it to like having a massage for your eyeballs. I say that's what it feels like if your eyes were to get a massage. This is what it feels like. So when I got prescription sunglasses, I tried to mimic that Serengeti look because I had the gray sunglasses and those work pretty good, but I didn't experience the overall satisfaction of having those orange tint. So that's my personal thing. But I was going to say one thing that's really, really apparent now to me going from the 7.3 to the Airbus are the windscreens are much bigger on the Airbus.
yeah.
On the 7.3, they were really the front and the side were really small.
Yeah.
So we used to just keep passenger briefing cards up there on the sun deck, on the flight deck,
Yeah.
and we'd use that as a sun visor, and we'd still have a regular sun visor that would close down and come down, and it'd be the one you see through. It's like a tinted piece of plastic that you look through, but we really didn't have to carry anything on the 7.3 because again, RVSM airspace, it's a much better time to use it because now your separation is more controlled than climbing through non-RVSM. So we wouldn't put it up until we get an RVSM, but that was usually adequate. The card would cover the whole front windshield. We'd have a little bit of manipulation. And then we'd have side screens that we'd put up, and those were adequate for that too. So I'm going to have to see how the Airbus is. I'll probably have to do what you're talking about there, buy a pair of those sticky and some guys did have that on the 7.3. They had the it was like window tint that stuck to the glass, and you just spread it out, boom, and then when you're done you just peel it off and
wash it with some warm water in your sink if it gets dirty. Yeah, these are the I don't know if you can see this. These are
I do.
The little pop-ups.
Oh yeah,
right. And so
I have something like that in my car.
You peel them.
Yeah.
See, so that's plastic on this side that sticks, and this side is like a cloth.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I like that.
And it's see-through.
Yep, I see you.
And I've got 2 sets of these, so it's 4 total. And what I'll usually do is, the side roll-up plastic that's on what we used to call the DV window or the side window. Those are pretty adequate But if you have the sun blaring through, I always put one of these behind it and adds.
Softens it. Yeah.
Another thing that I've seen a lot of pilots do, and I try to always have them with me, is have some binder clips in the bottom of your bag. Mine are actually attached to my miniature logbook. I don't have that within reach right now, but the binder clips work great because what you can do is you can the sun visor that's attached to the aircraft that you can use obviously is not enough when you're staring at the sun and you're traveling east in the morning or west in the evening. You don't want the sunlight blaring in your eyes. So you put the visor down and then you take the QRC, the quick reference card, and you can binder clip it to this visor, and then it can adjust it. And it acts kind of like what your emergency cards were on the 7.3. Obviously, you can't prop them in the front glass of an Airbus because it's such a big window because it's angled. So what I usually do is I'll use the binder clips with the QRC attached to the sun visor, and then I'll adjust it and it'll block out the light just fine. So I'm not carrying around a bunch of extra stuff.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
Now, the baseball hat was something that I picked up when I was based in Los Angeles back in Sandpiper days, because every landing after 3 o'clock in the afternoon is going to be into the sun reflecting off the Pacific Ocean. So wearing sunglasses, they're going to obviously make your instrumentation dark because your eyes have adjusted because you got a big ball of burning gas right in front of you, causing you to have to squint and try to see an airport. So what I would do is I'd put on a baseball hat, and now I would just keep my head down so that the hat bill acted as a sun visor.
It's almost like fog, the hood.
Like foggles,
when
yeah.
you're flight training, fog the hood, yeah.
The hood. So I would, look at the instrumentation, and then I'd need to look up. I'd look up to the runway, and the bill of the hat would block just enough of the horizon to where I didn't have the reflection of the sun on the ocean in front of me. And I could just look up at the runway and then look back down at the instrumentation. So exactly like a hood. And I sometimes carry that around with me. I've lately, since I've gotten these sun visors, I don't carry it around anymore, the little baseball hat, because there are, depending on the company you work for, they say you're not allowed to wear that because it limits your view of the overhead panel. So
yeah, and that's something I learned too. That overhead panel is way up there.
Yep.
I mean, it goes way back.
Yep. And it's not illuminated at night.
Oh, it isn't?
No. So the overhead panel that is above your head is.
Oh, okay.
But the
circuit
breaker panel, the one that's behind you that goes way back.
49 VU panels.
The 49 VU. Yeah, that's not illuminated. And unlike the Embraer, that you can use a flashlight to activate the, what is it, the iridescence?
Luminescent light.
Luminescence.
Yeah.
This doesn't have that. Doesn't have that.
Yeah, that's cool. Oh, okay. So you just got to illuminate it with your light, flashlight, with or something.
Yeah, you just have to. And some of the Airbuses have a flashlight on the flight deck that's accessible to each pilot, and some do not. So it's I think some of them are on the back panel near the fire extinguisher, and some of them are one on each side. But again, that's emergency equipment. You really shouldn't be using that unless you have an emergency.
Right on. Yeah.
Well, we've
cool
had
stuff.
We've had a wonderful show today. I just want to say thank you to you guys. Before we wrap it up, I was wondering if any of you have seen any films lately in relation to aviation.
I just watched the Sully movie the other day, just so it's a rerun. Just happened to be on while I was studying. I was like, oh, this is perfect Airbus training right about now. Let's see how he did it. But no, I actually haven't seen any aviation related movies in the past couple weeks, unless you consider Sully doing a rerun, being watching a new movie. I think I told you about that other one though, right? Was it Flight? No, 7500. Did you
Oh
watch
yeah,
that one yet?
7500. I did watch that one. I
Yeah.
think we talked about
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
It was a little frustrating to
Yeah.
watch. It wasn't very realistic in any way, shape, or form. The cockpit and the flows was nice to see.
Yeah, that was neat.
Accurately being depicted. And it was a psychological thriller with the guy's wife / girlfriend, whatever, as the flight attendant that was, inevitably gonna be in danger, and he was gonna open the cockpit door, and come on, man.
Yeah.
Not very.
But that was pre-September 11th. That could have been what it was like.
Yeah, but this was a post 9/11 thing, because they had the flight deck door and the cameras and all that stuff in place. And
Sure.
Recently my family and I sat down and watched the movie Flight Plan with Jodie Foster. This is a movie that came out in 2005. It is a German-American psychological thriller mystery filmed, was directed by Robert Schwentke. I don't know. I had seen the previews for this over the years, but I never really sat down to watch it. And we decided, well, let's take a look. It's a Netflix movie. I wouldn't have gone out to the theater to see this, and if so, I would have been disappointed. It's not really a film about aviation. The aircraft is fake. It's like, oh, this new jet and this new jumbo jet, and it's a movie where a recently widowed character played by Jodie Foster, who worked for the airline, or not the airline, but the manufacturer of this new jumbo jet, has quit, and her young daughter are traveling, and they get on this red-eye flight in the middle of the night, and they're the first ones to board the aircraft, and somewhere in the middle of the flight, she nods off, and her daughter goes missing, and no one can find her, and the murder mystery begins. It was entertaining. Just the aviation aspect of it was just that, an aspect of the plot. And I love the computer room and the nose of the aircraft. There's no radar on this aircraft. It's just a big hollow nose. It's like a Dr. Evil lair. It just was so bad. It was not realistic in terms of aircraft and flight and stuff. But it was
almost like they should have hired an aviation consultant to be like, hey guys, let's make this a little more realistic.
Yeah, the all the space and the server room and the crawl spaces, and it's like this isn't a building,
right?
So but entertaining film. Not my favorite. I'd give it 2.5 stars.
Yeah. Well, that's how they are sometimes.
And we want to know also what you think out there, the listeners. What are some of your favorite aviation films? Who knows? Maybe you have one that we haven't seen yet, and we'd love to give it a try.
Definitely. I can't wait for the Top Gun, 2 to come out. They've been putting that thing off for forever, and I've seen the trailer.
Yeah,
and it just looks. I'm just excited because it was such a good movie. Back in 1986, I think, when it first came out. And, me and my good friends were all, getting ready to go into the aviation business, getting out of high school and stuff. So, obviously probably one of the greatest recruiting tools for the U.S. Navy at the time. But, and then also, I think I talked about this earlier in earlier podcasts. Whenever you make a sequel, you really have to do a good job at it, because if the first movie was just legendary, you don't want to ruin it with a sequel and not meet the expectation of the fan base.
Very true.
Yeah. So there's gonna be a lot of pilots watching this movie, and they're gonna have their critique sunglasses on, and they're going to be very super critical over how this movie was produced and everything. Of course, Tom Cruise did it, and I know that they use actual flying scenes in the movie, so it's going to be it's pretty true to life, I guess. As Still going to be a movie, but
Yeah, I've seen quite a
be
bit
good.
of the documentary footage on the making of, and I guess Tom Cruise was insistent that all the key playing actors physically were being filmed in the cockpit of these jet fighters pulling G-forces, because he said that the G-forces on the face and body can never be simulated accurately. So it was
stress
his
and everything that they're experiencing.
Exactly, the contortions to the skin and face, and so it was through his insistence that the director and the producers agreed to have this footage done in an accurate depiction of what it's like to fly an air fighter aircraft in these scenarios. And I also understand that Mr. Cruise would fly his P-51 Mustang to the set.
Oh, really?
Daily,
Kinda show off.
It just fly in. Just flew with my P-51 now. Where's my
showing off,
motorcycle?
but I am.
Assistant, where's my motorcycle?
That's right.
His exploits are legendary.
Say, you guys want to go play volleyball after this? Take off our shirts or something, maybe? Go take a shower? No, just kidding.
Yeah. You get on that. Well, so very much looking forward to it. Yeah, the release date's been pushed back to either after Thanksgiving or Christmas. I know that's been pushed back many times, and they're just waiting for, I guess, the right time to do it.
Because I know initially it came out when COVID was just starting to take stride and all the movie theaters were closed down, and for a big movie like this, you want to make sure everybody can get out there and see it. And
well, it's one of the highest revenue costing films, and now they need to make their money back, right? So
yeah, totally,
for sure.
Yep.
Well, what I wanted to wrap up the show with was some more feedback. We got some customer feedback. Yay.
Cool, man. I like this stuff. This is good.
Hey, I was so excited to receive this. This one came in the other day from someone at Sigli Lewis, one of our Icelandic listeners. He says, "Hey guys, first of all, love your show. It's the best. I'm a new listener, but I heard you guys talk about some friends in Iceland. That is awesome. I work for center cargo as a center cargo agent at Airport Assistance, an airline service in Keflavik Airport, but aiming for a flight school soon, though I am 39 years old. Never too late, right? All right, keep rocking that podcast, man. We love to have some response here. I'll get right back to you on that. Take care, from Siggy." Now, Siggy, yes, absolutely. We love the feedback. Thank you so much. Good luck on your flight training. Really excited to hear that you're starting on this adventure. Last time we had friends of the Squawk Ident podcast on was back on Flight 49 of the Squawk Ident podcast, Vikings Take Flight, where we interviewed Sibi and Runar, our friends from Iceland. We talked about their journey. They made it all the way over to their legacy carrier over there in Iceland, and then the pandemic hit, and they both got furlough notices. Sibi recently posted a wonderful photo of he and his family out on a little vacation there in Iceland, and he had the most rockin' beard I have seen on a Viking, man.
Yeah, I think those guys grow beards like I grow weeds in my garden, man. It's amazing how fast their facial hair grows.
I'm telling you, man. He's like, "Where's the dragon?" So yeah, hopefully we can catch up with Sibi and Runar soon. And to our loyal listeners and the feedback, thank you so much. And Siggy, thank you for sending that in. Absolutely love receiving it, and hope to hear more about your journey as well.
Yeah, best of luck, Siggy. Thanks for the feedback. We really appreciate it.
I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to Rob, Roger, and even Kyle for joining us last week, and coming on this journey with us. As Flight 84 is starting its final descent into the virtual airport, we here at Squawk Ident just want to say thanks for coming along on this adventure. Please help us out. Make sure to subscribe and follow to the Squawk Ident podcast. Please spend just a moment and write us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to the show. We appreciate your support, especially your feedback. You can send us audio feedback and comments via our website at www.aviatortony.com. That's Alpha Victor, the number 8, Romeo Tango Oscar November Yankee.com. There you can also find audio archives, photos from the flight line, our Squawk Ident pilot shop, the guest book photo tab, and you can also contribute to the show financially right there from the homepage. And if you can do it, hey, $5, that would really help out.
Yeah, it helps out with cost.
Absolutely. Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram users can also find us under the Squawk Ident podcast. And a big final thank you to Rob and Roger for joining me today, and a big thank you to you for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there, be safe, and take care of each other. Hey guys, it's been a wonderful show. Thanks guys. See ya.
See ya.
Take care, everyone. Fly safe.